I just wanted to make something that I would want to watch. The topics that are being talked about on late night have gone in two directions. It's gone either like completely political, which I think is awesome and needed and cool, or gone completely apolitical. And I think what Outside Tonight is trying to do is put on like a really fun comedy show that has a clear far left heartbeat, but is talking about things that like young people actually care about and think about and do. And the goal is to just make something that resonates without being try hard. Like in episode 3, I had on a panel of people I'd been on 2 to 3 dates with who all rejected me. That was really fun. People loved that, and that was humiliating.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Obsessed the Podcast. I'm Kevin Fallon, here to guide you through all the TV shows, movies, and pop culture nonsense that we think is unmissable. And today's guest is Julian Shapiro-Barnum, who you might know as your favorite guy from the internet. He is best known for his series Recess Therapy, where he asks kids basic questions about life, and their answers are so profound and so funny and so adorable. I watch his videos every time they come across my social media feed. He's also the host of Celebrity Substitute, where celebs like Millie Bobby Brown and Lea Michele and Quinta Brunson teach elementary schoolers about their craft. Now he's a host of Outside Tonight with Julian Shapiro-Barnum, a YouTube late night series that's breaking all the rules. And he's the author of a new book coming out. You might know Julian from his viral videos, but now you're going to get to know him for who he is. So here's my interview with Julian Shapiro-Barnum. Hi, Julian. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. I'm doing well, too. Thanks. I'm really excited that you are apparently going to be saving late night. So thank you for that.
I never said it. Well, maybe I did as a joke. You're welcome is what I should have said.
It's true. And that you do say that in the first episode of your new YouTube late night talk show, Outside Tonight, which I believe is also YouTube's first late night talk show. Is that correct?
We stopped saying that. I think what we've learned is actually there have been many. We're just calling ourselves and you're right. Let me take that back. We are saving late night, and I did say that, and I stand by that. We are a YouTube talk show, late night talk show, but we're saying we're the internet's is our more is what we've decided to call ourselves.
Yes, the internet's late night show.
Exactly.
Yes, and you're shooting it. I mean, as the title suggests, all outside. You were shooting this outside in New York City, in Battery Park and at the Brooklyn Public Library. That's a pretty, I would imagine, challenging thing to do.
Yes. So the show is filmed entirely outside and entirely at night. It is, I think, the best thing about the show and the most painful thing about the show. But yeah, we film every episode in a brand new location. And it's pretty cool. We show up at a roller rink or in front of the Whitney Museum, and we transform it into a studio, and we have a couch and a band and a desk and rugs, if you can imagine. And yeah, I think the whole thought process behind that is there's two things. One, if you hear live music playing outside, it creates people come up and they come and watch. And I was like, it would be so cool if you heard music and you came up to watch and there was a whole show. You got a whole late night show. Thing two, I feel with digital culture and stuff like that, the city has become this studio. And also all these kids of the internet, we don't dream of studio shows anymore because it feels very inaccessible to us. If you go to Washington Square Park, there's a million people with their phones filming things. New York City has become this studio, and I feel I wanted to just lean into that because I love how accessible it is. And on top of that, it's if you want to go see The Tonight Show, you have to wait for God knows how long in a line to maybe get a ticket. And I was like, how can I create something that anybody can watch for free? We just don't tell people where we're going to be. So it's accessible if you know where to look.
Yes. And what I love also about how you introduce yourselves to audiences in the first episode, especially to those who might not know you from Recess Therapy or Celebrity Substitute. You tell them that you are 6'2" and 160 pounds soaking wet, which is apparently all the time.
Always.
You love to party, but you're mostly sober poppers only.
Mm-hmm.
You're unable to drive, but willing to learn. You're a passionate lover, but even more passionate about late night television. do you think that pretty much really does sum you up to people who may not know you?
I do know how to drive.
Okay.
We thought that was funny. But no, that's me, that's all you need to know. No, this was funny because for the past 5 years, all I've done is interview kids. That's like kind of what the public knows me for. But this is a project that I started even before recess therapy. This is a show that I started when I was 20 years old. During COVID, I put a card table and 2 chairs on a street corner one night, and I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing I've ever done ever. And ever since that, I've been fighting to make this show and really wanted to bring this thing to life. And so it's been very fulfilling to finally do it. But yeah, I would say mostly sober poppers only. That's all I got.
Yeah, and you are definitely the first talk show host to ever talk about that. I don't recall Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert disclosing their poppers use to the audiences.
We've talked about ketamine. We're loose.
Well, it is interesting because you reference poppers and you talk about ketamine. There's a really fun bit where you try to figure out which of the people on set are drunk, high, or sober. You have a dog show to find out which dog is the gayest. And I think and you talk about your age a lot. You talk about how you're 26. You call yourself a 26-show bisexual twink. And what I think is so interesting about this is you're talking about things that are young. And late night is not typically an arena where youth and being young is embraced or even acknowledged at all. And I'm curious if you found that there is a space for youth and the things that young people talk about in the arena of late night.
When we started working on this show, I think my big thing was I just wanted to talk about the stuff I was thinking about, have on my friends, and make something that I would want to watch. And I think that came down to the show is pretty goofy, queer, and has a lot of alt comedians in it, and is pretty young, I think, or at least the tone of it is. And a lot of every episode is kind of asking a question, and the questions are a lot of my anxieties and neuroses. And I think typically late night does speak to a much older audience. And my hope is that in welcoming these topics and these people and these ideas into late night, just people my age will want to watch. Because I think everybody does watch late night, whether they realize or not, especially clips on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. Late night just is so deeply ingrained in culture. And I think there's all this conversation about late night struggling. People are really watching it. I think it's struggling on a network level, but people are really, really always watching late night. But I think what isn't happening is I don't think late night is speaking to people in the way that it maybe used to. And I think that's because the topics that are being talked about on late night I think late night's gone in 2 directions. It's gone either completely political, which I think is awesome and needed and cool, or it's gone completely apolitical. And I think what Outside Tonight is trying to do is put on a really fun comedy show that has a clear far left heartbeat, but is talking about things that young people actually care about and think about and do. And the goal is to just make something that resonates, and without being try hard. We weren't having. I wasn't saying this when we were writing. We were just doing. We were just oh, that would be fucking hilarious if we did that, and then we put it on. In episode 3, I had on a panel of people I'd been on 2 to 3 dates with who all rejected me. That was really fun, and that people loved that, and that was humiliating.
That was really funny. But going back to what you were saying about the way that people do consume late night now, even if they don't do it in the traditional way, you talk about how the internet has sort of broken up the concept of late night into pieces. And one of the things that you're trying to do with the show is bring it back together. And it's interesting that you're doing this at a time where, as you've also talked about on the show, Colbert was canceled. Jimmy Kimmel was taken off air for a little bit. Um, I'm curious if that at all was an impetus for doing this too, like looking at the state of late night where these traditional hosts are being sort of punished for their political views, and as a result of that, that the traditional format is dying and in crisis. Is that sort of state of the union part of why you wanted to do an internet version of this?
Truthfully, no. Like it was. This show is not a reaction. Like this is, like I said, this is a project that I started when I was 20, back when late night was kicking and doing great. But I think as we started working on it, like early 2025, it became a conversation where we're like, oh, this is a really interesting time to be working on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we got deeper and deeper into it, I think we started to feel like, oh, it feels like there's even more reason to be doing this. I don't think anyone ever, to create something is to know that it might not work. And I think in making Outside Tonight, I feel like we all were like, we have no idea if this is going to click. We have no idea if this is going to resonate. But like, if ever somebody was going to make like a totally independent late night show, this feels like a really meaningful time to give it a go, just in a time where late night is being threatened from the outside in, to make like a show that is owned and operated by creators and like totally independent. It feels like the right time to have that experiment be right now.
Yeah. And I also think what's interesting about this time for anyone who makes content in media, whether it's a late night TV show, internet content, whether you're writing articles, writing headlines for articles, making podcasts and podcast episodes, the Trump of it all is something that everyone has to reckon with. How much to talk about Trump, whether to be only obsessed with Trump, whether to make it a Trump-free zone, because there are people who will make your traffic go through the roof if you talk about Trump and only Trump. And there are people who don't want to associate with you at all because they don't want to be thinking about that man. So I'm curious, when you're doing a show like this, what you said addresses and engages with the conversations that people that you know are having. Do you think about how much to talk about Trump or if to make it a Trump-free zone?
Yeah, I mean, we weren't like, let's not talk about Donald Trump. That it was never like a thing where we were like, this is not that. I think like we were like, how, like, I think the show has always been like a comedy show. And I think comedy can and is political. And I also think the bodies you choose to put in a show is political. And I think if you look at like the stories we're telling, the bits we're doing, like the types of people we're populating Outside Tonight with, like, to me, that is a political statement. I think we felt like we were also kind of making a statement, or not making a statement. I feel like I said it a little bit ago, but I felt like late night was going in these two directions. And I wanted to like explore what that third thing was, that what I felt like late night kind of used to be, which was like a like kind of this Arsenio Hall model, which was like he was not apolitical by any means, but his show was also like a party. His show was a really good time. And I think with Outside Tonight, like I wanted it to feel a little bit like you could come on and have a really, really good time, but also like within a like-minded community. But no, we weren't like avoiding Trump. I also just like didn't want to talk about Donald Trump. It didn't feel like the space to talk about that. But it's also like there are other late night shows who are doing that better and smarter. It didn't feel like my arena a little bit.
Yeah. And I think what's also interesting about this show is there are a lot of people who know you as a host of Recess Therapy and as a host of Celebrity Substitute. But with this show, they're really getting to know more literally about you, who you are. Like you said, you had this really funny segment where you talked to people that you went on dates with and they rejected you. There's a whole episode where you talk about insecurities. And you talk about being insecure that you're not gay enough to be considered bisexual. It's these are really interesting things to talk about. I'm curious what it's been like for you to become now known for you and for talking about those really vulnerable things, which, again, not to always be comparing you to other late night talk show hosts and traditional hosts, but you don't see, Jimmy Fallon going up there and talking about his sexuality and whether or not he gives enough blowjobs to be considered bisexual. Like, what is that space been like for you?
Yeah, I've always been like a pretty private person. I especially with like recess therapy and celebrity substitute, I've always felt like because my work is with kids, I was like, my personal life can't be a part of the conversation, was kind of how I felt for a very long time. And like my Instagram always, like, I didn't post any pictures from my life. It was just like this thing where I was like, that's separate from who I am. But I think with this show, I just like wanted to change that. Like I just felt like a little bit like that wasn't true to me. And so leading up to the show, the head of socials for Outside Tonight, Bailey Whitehead, is an amazing comedian, and I like planned this like rebrand that was like a joke. But we did this like rebrand of Julian where I had my like wrecking ball like Disney kid moment. And we did all these videos where I like went really far in the other direction, and I like posted all these like awful shirtless pictures, and I like posted this video of me like trying to learn how to smoke a cigarette, and like did all these like thirst traps. I just like really did all this crazy stuff that like ultimately wasn't as crazy as the show was, but I think I wanted to like parody breaking out of the kid thing. And then ultimately I landed in the middle because like that's like not really me. But in kind of having an exercise in a fake rebrand, I felt like I was able to, I don't know, show people the more silly adult side of myself. And then it paved the way to being able to be more open and honest. Like it felt like I broke out with a joke and then landed with a more true version of myself. And I like it. I feel like it feels I don't know, I just feel like I was so careful for so long. And I think I think because when you work with kids, I felt like there was this big exercise in getting people to trust me and like realize that I was like a normal, friendly, kind person. But I feel like I've been doing this for so long that I'm not worried about that anymore. Like I know people know me. I think people know my heart, and I like feel welcomed and accepted. I like work with the Department of Education at this point. Like I don't feel like there's this onus on me to like do that anymore. And now I feel like I can do a show like this and still work with kids and do Outside Tonight or do a celebrity substitute recess therapy. And that to me is very freeing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of celebrity substitute, one of my favorite videos on the internet of the last few years is the one with Lea Michele and Jonathan Groff.
Love that.
It is so much fun to watch. For people who don't know, celebrity substitute, you bring in celebrities to basically teach a master class of what they're good at to elementary school students. And in this episode, Lea Michele and Jonathan Groff are putting on a talent show and sort of coaching the kids on their talents. And before you do that, you talk to Lea and Jonathan about their own talents, and you sort of go through this rapid fire thing about things that they know how to do, whether it's dancing or stage combat and things like that. And then you get to what Lea Michele says is, I think I know where this is going. And you ask her about reading. I think I was drinking coffee or something at the time and pretty much spit it out. What was going through your mind leading up to asking her about this viral meme of her not being able to read, doing it in this rapid fire way?
I had planned it, and I like just was like, I wasn't gonna ask it if the vibe wasn't right. But like at this point, I'd worked with Jonathan Groff a bunch of times, and like he was so familiar with me, and I think because of that, the vibes were good. And she had just talked about it. Or no, she hadn't yet. The vibes were right. The stars were aligned. I was like, she's gonna be okay with this. and I went for it, and she was such a good sport about it. But that was so fun. I love doing that show so much. We have so many. We have Tom Holland, Cat's Eye, SZA. We have so many good episodes coming out soon of that show. It's like really stacked this season.
I mean, anyone who interviews celebrities for a living has like the few of them that um, the thought of actually being in a room with them and talking with them is overwhelming. Like, we can be professional talking celebrities every day, but there's just the select few that it is just overwhelming to think about being with them. You've just mentioned a bunch of really big stars that are coming up on the show. You've also talked to Millie Bobby Brown and Quinta Brunson. Have you experienced that? Have you had one of the people come on the show that's been that sort of overwhelming presence for you?
You know, I get overwhelmed by like people who I've like really looked up to. Like, like, do you know who Rhett and Link are?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the internet guys. Yeah.
Like, I met Rhett and Link, and I watched them every single day of middle school, and I got like I like couldn't even really talk. But like to me, I don't get nervous around like A$AP Rocky. I'm like, hi A$AP, nice to meet you. Like, I don't whatever. Like, he's so talented, he's so amazing. But like people who I looked up to when I was a child, I revert back to how I was when I was a child. So like Rhett and Link, when I met Will Ferrell, I got really nervous. Like people who like when I was a kid, I thought they were cool. I like can't really contain myself, but like people who I'm meeting as an adult, I feel so used to it now.
I want to talk to you a little bit too about recess therapy, because obviously that's the thing that sort of has exploded your life in all the best ways, I'm sure. What I find so interesting about it is that I think pop culture has for decades been obsessed with this idea of, kids say the darndest things and what comes out of their mouth can be so precocious and so funny. And that's been mine for TV shows before. But the idea that what they say could be considered therapy and like life lessons because it's coming from the purest of minds and hearts is something that I think is kind of renegade. I'm curious for you, when you first suspected that could be something that wasn't just fodder for comedy, but something that is actually really emotionally and profoundly impactful for people, the way that this series has been.
It started that way a little bit. It like became more comedic, honestly. But I think after the first interview, I was like, oh, this is very profound. The first like 150 episodes of Recess Therapy were like genuine, not all of them, but like a lot of them were like genuine. I made a very long list when I started the show of like real questions and topics I needed to talk to kids about, and like really wondered what kids would think about. And I just like, they have a way of like taking a very complicated idea that like I can't wrap my head around and like simplifying it for me, or just like looking at it through a lens that like I as an adult could not look at it through. And I think that is very powerful. And being able to watching them delayer something is very cathartic. Can I do something shameless really quick?
Sure.
I have a book. It's called How to Grow Up Without Becoming a Grown-Up. It comes out August 4th. And you can watch all the interviews of Recess Therapy, but the reason I wrote a book about stuff by work with kids is because I started to feel like more impactful in the way that kids were, more impactful than the things kids were saying was the way that kids were acting. Like, I feel like the way that kids like move through the world and like interact with each other and people and problems, to me, was like really speaking volumes. But like that was the kind of stuff that like I couldn't condense to a 1-minute clip. And so 3 years ago, I started to like work on some essays about like all the ways that I felt like adults could be happier if they acted more like kids. And now I have a whole book about it. So you should check it out. I'm very proud of it. I'd never written a book before, and I put my heart and soul into it. So here's my book haul.
I mean, what I love about the book, especially its title, but also the things that you were just talking about, the themes of growing up and not losing the parts of a child within you that can be really valuable to embrace as an adult. But I also find really interesting, you have a whole episode of Outside Tonight where you talk about your sort of insecurities about growing up and not being grown up enough, or not wanting to grow up more. And I am curious, I don't know if maybe this is like also part of a reaction to spending so much time with children, but you do seem very preoccupied with the idea of aging and becoming an adult and acting like adult and growing up. Are you feeling something existential about that right now? And do you think it's in reaction to sort of what your career has been?
You know, it's funny. I made this connection earlier today, and I genuinely hadn't thought about it until today. But the first episode of Recess Therapy was about growing up, and the first episode of Outside Tonight was about growing up. So clearly, I'm still thinking about it. I think, you know, I'm 27 now. I just had my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I think I've always thought I'd feel different at certain ages, and I think I always feel younger than I think I still feel very young always. Like I always expect to feel older, and I still think I'm like waiting to feel like a grown up sometimes. I think that's like one part of it. And then the other part of it is I'm like, I don't want to be like a Peter Pan syndrome kind of guy. I want to at some point grow up and like have all that. And I think that's just like interesting. But I also like, I'm not that worried about it. But it is something it's something I think about. I also feel like I can talk about this forever. I feel like there's like a lot of I feel like young people really want to stay young these days. And that to me is troubling.
I will also say, as from my position, as like the old gay talking to a younger one,
Please.
I do think you are at the exact age of that sort of existential crisis.
Right.
And what happens is you do feel really young for really long, and then all of a sudden you feel like a grown up and an adult.
It just happens.
And also sort of like that you're killing it. Like that's what happened. Like that's a stage. Like I'm really killing being an adult right now, and then feeling old as fuck hits you like a tidal wave. And that's a really hard experience. So I think the sort of fulcrum point where you're at right now is a really exciting one to be at, and you should like really enjoy it.
I'm every year it gets better. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Every year I go, oh, thank God I'm not 24 anymore. I'm liking getting older. I think it's great. I'm pro.
Yes. How I wanted to end this because, obviously, people's time in school is a running theme of your work between Celebrity Substitute and Recess Therapy. I thought it might be fun to ask you, based on the celebrities that you've met and that sort of some class superlatives. If you were, if this was the end of the year and we're doing the yearbook.
Please.
So first, who do you think would be selected for Life of the Party?
Life of the Party of celebrities I've worked with?
Yeah.
Kehlani.
Kehlani. Ooh, why?
She was so fun. She brought so much energy, and she never wanted, or Renee Rapp, either of them. They never went to the green room. They stayed in it the whole time. They were with the kids, talking.
Nice. What about Class Clown?
Class Clown. That would go to, maybe. I'm forgetting anyone I've ever worked with right now. Class Clown. Who was really silly? SZA. She was like goofing. She was goofing too much.
I would also offer, having just watched the episode, Millie Bobby Brown was way sillier than I ever would have thought she would be.
She was so fun. Oh my God. She was so much fun. I loved having her on. I thought she was gonna be serious.
Same.
She was I think she was like, I'm a mom now. Yeah. She was like, I'm ready to be a mom. She loved it.
Okay. Most likely to brighten your day.
That's great. Jonathan Groff. All the time. He is the perfect person.
I have been blessed enough to be in his presence several times, and it is like...
Have you hugged him?
Yes. It's like angels radiating warmth and sunshine and joy onto you from him.
He makes you feel like he has a magic to him. He's a wonderful man.
Yes. And finally, best shoulder to cry on.
Best shoulder to cry on. Alex Warren, the singer. He's emotional. And there was a lot of crying in that episode. It's not out yet, but things got emotional.
Wow.
Not me. No, I cried that day, actually. Just kidding. Off camera.
I cry always. So if I was interviewing Alex Warren and he got emotional, I would be sobbing on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Well, if I was going to pick a person most likely to take over the internet in a great way, it would be you, Julian.
Stop.
So thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Kevin, I love this. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Julian. I really enjoyed chatting with you. That was really fun. And now we want to hear from you. What celebrity would you want to have as your own substitute teacher? Let us know. We love hearing from you. And as always, subscribe to us on YouTube at the Obsessed channel. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like me, subscribe to my Substack at obsessed.substack.com. Thank you to our producer, Rachel Passer, and we'll see you next time.